There we go.
All right, wonderful.
All right. Juan.
Miko, what's up, man?
Yeah, what's up? Nice to meet you in the online space. Thank you for taking your time. And would you mind introducing yourself to my viewers?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pleasure to meet you. I know we've spoken
Likewise.
on and off for a while, probably since I think, how did we first connect? The Jam of the Week days?
I don't know. Yeah, I can't remember.
I think it might have been from that time. I just remember you from your Godin, and you were one of the few nylon string guys out there who were doing some really cool things.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
But yeah, as far as me, I'm a guitar player and composer from Colombia. I'm currently in Colombia right now, but kind of have been moving around a little bit. Um, and yeah, that's really what I do. Mostly just performance, playing around here and there, teaching as well. I've taught at the Berklee Global Network School here in Colombia, so that was something I did extensively for a time.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. But first off, my first question is, you're Colombian, but you sound American to me. I don't hear. How does that work?
It's
Is it
it's
just you're good with language, or I mean, you went to Berkeley, right?
I did, yeah. And it's a long story. Basically, I'm half Colombian, half Indian. I was born and raised in Dubai,
Oh,
and I lived in Dubai studying at a British school until I was 17.
I see.
And then I went to Berkeley. I stayed in the US for maybe about 5.5 years or so.
Okay.
Moved to Colombia, moved back to Dubai. Now I'm back in Colombia.
Oh, so where did you live the most in?
The most was Dubai. I lived in Dubai for 17, 18 years.
Okay. So you speak Arabic too, or
No, you see, the thing about living in Dubai is that there are so many expats living in
right?
Dubai.
Yeah.
Like 90% of the population is expat. I wish I was exaggerating that number.
Uh-huh.
But as a
That's
result,
interesting.
you get around with English pretty much.
Okay, so you have released like three records in your
Yeah,
name,
yeah, 3 records as a leader and a couple of singles here and there.
and they're all original material.
Yes, all my own music.
The last one is called what's it called again? It's
Ether.
yeah, it's pretty recently, right? Like it's
That was just released last year.
okay. And is that you singing on it or
That is me.
okay, so you're singing as you're playing or did you overdub it or how did
So for that record, it was kind of a I've never really done this before. And I think it's a very uh, infrequent way of doing things, but we multi-tracked the whole record because
okay.
nobody was actually, we didn't record in the same place.
Ah,
So sure enough, even with my rinky-dink setup at home, which was basically a Zoom recorder, a 57,
oh
and
really?
an acoustic mic. So because of the acoustic mic, I couldn't sing at the same time as playing, but it kind of worked out well to overdub it afterwards so I could focus a little bit more on tuning and things like that.
Yeah, because that's another thing I wanted to ask you about. You mic your electric guitar with a actual microphone, right?
I
Sometimes.
I used to. I
Okay.
used to. Through the process of doing Ether, we actually realized we were using very little of the acoustic mic.
Uh-huh.
And since maybe mid 2024, I decided to experiment just by using the 57 in front of my cab. And so
Ah,
anything you hear after June, basically anything you hear after July, I would say, 2024, that I've done on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, that's just 57 in front of the amp.
okay. Because that's something I see people do sometimes. That's you studied with Tim Miller, right? That's
I did.
and he doesn't he do that sometimes? Like,
In the studio. Yeah.
right.
I remember on his old Canton, he actually had the mic inside the body,
Oh,
but he never really used it. And but when he's on recordings, he usually has a condenser, I think, right by his picking hand.
yeah, it's very. I really like that sound. So yeah, I really like your tone. I know you have a video where you explain
Hmm.
your how you shape your tone with the effects and everything, and it has a like a punch to it that I really appreciate. I don't know if it's something you like think about, but there's a lot of people that try to get rid of the attack, like Kurt Rosenwinkel, they shave off the.
Mm.
But in your playing, there's a like a punchiness to it that I don't know. I can only think of like John Schofield. But have you developed it out of your own kind of idea how you wanted to sound it, or are you inspired by other players? Or
That's that's an interesting question because, funnily enough, I was talking about this briefly with a student of mine the other day,
uh
and when I was in Dubai last, so that was maybe 2019, I had the opportunity to work with a mentor named Daniele Camardo, who's this wonderful, wonderful electric bass player, plays with Lionel Lueke and those kind of
oh,
guys. Like total happenstance. I don't even know how it happened that it was in Dubai of all places. Like that doesn't usually happen. But he gave me this piece of advice. It's kind of overly philosophical. Of he told me, "You've done something incredible in that the guitar is kind of an extension of yourself. But now I want you to do the opposite. I want you to try become an extension of the guitar." It's like, I'll let you figure that out. And then he just
uh-huh.
walks off, and I'm there having my lunch going, what, what
Yeah,
on earth does that mean? He spoke in koans, essentially. So I'm trying to unpack this, like I spent months, if not years, like unpacking this phrase.
uh-huh.
And some people might wonder, like, what on earth? But what I came to realize was it kind of accept playing a guitar
Yeah,
and the fact that the medium I play, I tried for so long to I did have a phase where I tried, oh, I want more sustain. I'm gonna roll off my tone knob so there's not as much attack or high frequency. Um, I'm gonna use like a stereo delay or like a mod delay to kind of mask the attack and
mhm.
doing all these things to make the guitar sound like a horn or a piano
Yeah.
or something else. And after that experience and kind of exploring on my own, I kind of came to appreciate like what a guitar does. And I actually have my guitar over here with me, but hearing that uh punchy, like hearing the attack
Yeah.
because and even, having the tone knob much higher on the instrument because you hear all of this,
Yeah.
you can hear every note in the chord. Or let me give you original sound for musicians so you get a better feel for it. But you hear every detail in the chord.
We should
So,
also mention the elephant in the room that that's your new guitar, right?
yes, this is the new guitar I got from Kiesel. They ever so kindly sent it to me. Uh, Beautiful
Yeah.
finish on that thing. Like, and I'm really loving the multi-scale component to it.
Did you play seven strings before, or is?
No, so I started playing seven last year,
Oh, cool.
but getting back to the thing
Yeah.
about tone, um, so appreciating what the guitar can do, and you asked me about like what I do with my tone. These days, my tone is just straight into the amp.
Really.
So it's just cable, amp, and that's really it. So if I'm playing, I'm usually controlling everything from the volume knob, maybe the tone knob, depending on like if I'm playing through a backline amp or something, um, and getting the sound out of the instrument just from the fingers.
So what are the pickups on are on that?
So these are Kiesel's proprietary pickups. This is the Holdsworth pickup in
Right.
the neck, which was what I used on my last seven string. And I got a slightly different pickup in the bridge. It's their beryllium. pickup, which I believe is an Alnico 2, so kind of like a more traditional PAF sound. It's usable. Like I actually quite enjoy it compared to the other guitar. Oop. It's very articulate.
So you're not using any compression or anything?
No compression. I mean, I do have the gain knob on the amp. It's a multi-channel amp. So on the clean channel, I've got the gain up a fair ways. So I think that's maybe introducing some compression. But otherwise, there's no pedal in the chain.
Interesting. So
There's
yeah,
only a reverb in the effects loop.
so I'm gonna guess that you're playing Kiesel because Alan Holdsworth did use those, right? Like you are, it's not a stretch of the imagination to assume that you are an Alan Holdsworth.
No, I mean, especially if I'm pulling out like weird and wacky chords, then yeah, Alan was definitely a major influence for me. Um, Ironically, when I got my first Carvin, which is over here, which was a Holdsworth
Oh
model,
yeah, yeah. I'm thinking he played Carvin. Yeah, he didn't play Kiesel.
they're the same company.
Right,
So back then it was known as Carvin. When I got
right.
that guitar, there weren't too many options on the market that were easily accessible back then. It was
So,
basically you either go ahead.
so those guitars are not in production anymore, the ones that he played, that you have
No,
one.
they still are. You
Oh,
can
they
get
are.
them. Their Kiesel kept it as kind of a legacy model, to
Okay.
honor Alan. So you can still get it with Alan specs and everything. But when I got it, there was only Carvin or Kiesel, Strandberg, or you had to get like a Steinberger.
Hmm.
Beyond, if you wanted anything outside of those three, you had to go to a builder and ask them to build
Right.
you a headless instrument. And I really resonated more with the Carvin approach. It was a all wood instrument. I liked the construction, I liked the aesthetic. So I ended up with it just kind of out of happenstance, but partially because of Alan, yes.
But he wanted the guitar to not sound like a guitar, right? Like I'm not an Alan Holdsworth expert. It's just one of those
Yeah.
like he's to me he's like how would I say unattainable. Like you can't. He's just like I don't try to play like him because I will never be able to. But
Hmm.
uh, from what I understand, he didn't really like the sound of the guitar, right? He wanted to sound like something else.
Yeah, based on what I remember, um, the the whole premise was that he wanted to play saxophone as a
Right.
bass or some sort of wind instrument. But his parents couldn't afford it, I believe, and he just kind of ended up with the guitar. So he ended up kind of pursuing that wind sound throughout his whole career. But yeah, the irony of what we were talking about, but I guess that's kind of the path you eventually have to take, just when you try look for your own thing, sometimes you have to divert from the path of your heroes.
Yeah. I personally like the sound of the guitar. Like I always, especially like the acoustic sound of a guitar. That's why
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by the trend then now that people are trying to get an acoustic sound out of an electric guitar because the
Hmm.
technology kind of allows us to do that, I guess. So, but other than Holdsworth, who are your influences? Do you have any like guitar or any others influences that you would? I'm gonna guess when I listen to your records, I hear a little bit of John Coltrane. Is that
Yeah, to some degree. Train took me a while to get into. I'm always upfront with people when they ask me about that. Like my ears had to open up to learn how to
sure?
listen to Train. And but once A Love Supreme finally clicked, or My Favorite Things, that was the other record I really
Mm.
loved. Once I heard those two records and really made sense of it, it was like, oh, okay, now I get it. And more specifically, of those on those records, I mean, Train sounds beautiful, but I love Elvin. and
Mm.
Elvin's like just the rhythmic intensity that Elvin Jones brought to the band. But other influences, for me, another huge one is the Yellow Jackets. Like I'm a
Oh,
huge Yellow Jackets fan. Um, the Matheny group, so kind of a lot of that um, fusion, but really rooted in jazz.
yeah,
Um, Keith Jarrett as well. I love Keith's flow and how he just so easily
oh,
taps into a flow state and play. I mean, Keith's intros are some of the most beautiful things in existence.
absolutely.
Um, Plenty of piano players, Aaron Parks, Brad Meldau. That's definitely a strong root, and by extension of that, a lot of classical music because I started out as a classical piano player.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because I saw your interview on, was it Streetwise Guitar?
Hmm.
And you said that you were influenced by classical music, but so how did that manifest itself? Like you listened to classical music, were you exposed to class, or did you actually play
So as far as I mean, I did maybe 10 years of classical piano
piano? Okay.
as a kid. So I was listening to it, it was always on around the house because my dad, for instance, is a huge classical fan. So I ever since I was maybe well, basically ever since I can remember, I was just exposed to the great composers essentially. So
Mm.
Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, so on. And the way it came about on the guitar was kind of through people like Vardan of Sepian.
Oh, sorry, who?
Vardan of Sepian. He's an Armenian pianist who, again, kind of from that same crowd, like went to Berklee around the same time as Lueke, Daniele, Camarda, and all of these guys.
Okay.
But hearing that, I was like, oh, okay, so I'm hearing more of this classical meets jazz
Yeah.
approach. And then through that, I, kind of worked my way back towards Brad Meldau and Keith as well. So, and Chick always kind of had that somewhat ever present in his playing. So, based on that, like I kind of eventually ended up back at Chopin
Mm.
and Ravel and Debussy and Rachmaninoff and
But,
just started incorporating all of that.
but do you transcribe stuff for and play it on?
Occasionally, yeah,
Yeah.
what was it? Like like that's straight out of the B flat minor nocturne.
Okay.
Or there was something I uploaded to Instagram a few days ago, which was also from Chopin's. It was from a Chopin waltz, I
Right. Yeah,
think.
those are amazing.
They're beautiful, and if you can put them onto the instrument, they
Yeah.
show you different ways of playing things, or just like, oh, that's an interesting approach. So yeah, sometimes I'll go straight to the scores and just read and learn that way. Or in the case of the Chopin waltz, I'll find a recording I really like and try to tap into how a piano player would perform that as
Mm.
well.
Yeah, I think even like Barry Harris talks about like there is a jazz
Yeah,
harmony inside Chopin. You can find a lot of the stuff he's talking about. And Kurt Rosenwinkel recently, was it Chopin? I think he did a Chopin or no Brahms. Like,
both. They did a Chopin record and a Brahms record. Like
yeah,
I think it was the piano player's idea, and
right,
he basically got a monster rhythm section in Kurt to play this music.
right. Yeah,
But
I'm fascinated by that. I play classical guitar. That's how I started. But classical guitar, it's a thing in and of itself. That's you don't play Chopin or anything unless somebody transcribed,
and arranged and adapted
arranged
it.
it
Yeah.
right for guitar. But that the and also the meeting of classical music and jazz. Usually, I can't remember. I talked to somebody about this. Usually, it doesn't end up very well when
Yeah.
jazz musicians try to play jazz or classical music or vice versa. But there are some cases where it really works, and I don't know, like Ralph Towner, maybe like when it's like the two worlds collide, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a handful of guys who do it quite well. I would Ralph Towner is definitely a name that comes to mind. Um, Also, I mean, Brad for sure. I think that's a
Hmm.
very honest influence of how that manifests in Meldau's playing. Um, but yeah, they're usually kind of I feel this way about a lot of music, and when I try to incorporate like an influence that doesn't come from jazz, I try to be very honest about how it comes about because it's very easy to kind of shoehorn the idea and say, "Oh, I'm going to do this style of music, but also with jazz harmony." And in my mind, it ends up sounding a little contrived
Yeah,
in ways.
yeah. So how would you describe your music, like your records? Well, is it jazz?
I've been struggling with that label for a bit now
Yeah.
because I definitely think, yes, it falls under the jazz umbrella in that there where the interaction is a heavy component, improvisation
Yeah.
is a very important component, and I approach things more like a jazz composer sometimes.
Mm.
But then there is that introduction of classical music. There's, I guess, the um, the influence of global music, just
Mm.
because I've traveled a lot, been to many places, met people from many different places. Um, so, for instance, on the new record, there's some influences from local Colombian music, some from Brazilian music, some from like North African Ganawa and Shabi
Mm.
music, or like the Mediterranean as well, because I just happen to work with some people from the Mediterranean. So I would say if I had to be truly honest, it's really, I think of it, it is under the jazz umbrella, but it is fusion in the true sense of the word.
Yeah.
I know that can sometimes be considered a dirty word in the jazz world,
Mm.
but kind of in the line of Return to Forever, Weather Report, like really going back to that energy.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter with just labels, but some of the ECM artists over here in Europe, they would say that we don't play jazz, we play
Hmm.
improvised music. What they mean is they don't play swing, I think.
Hmm.
It's not, and they don't want to, as that they would say that jazz is an American culture,
Right.
but there are some swing like on your albums. There's a little bit of not straight ahead swing, but like Coltrane-ish kind of
Exactly.
swing.
Yeah,
So,
because I really identified with that era of swing playing and developing a good swing feel.
but you're coming from like most of us electric guitar players, we come from rock
Hmm.
and heavy metal, I think, right?
Yep, that's I honestly that's what exposed me to seven string in the first place. I
Oh,
remember
okay.
being 15, 15, 16 years old and thinking, I really want a seven string. I really want a seven string because I was listening to bands that use seven string guitars. Go figure, it took me 15 years to get around to it, but I eventually got one.
Yeah, you like my fellow countryman Meshuggah, right?
Yes, a huge fan of Meshuggah.
Yeah. I hear that a
And
lot in jazz musicians talk about Meshuggah. When I was living in Canada, people are like, "Oh, you're from Sweden. You do you know Meshuggah?" I was like, even my the dean of the school, he was like, "Do you like Meshuggah?" I was like, "Not really, but I mean, I respect them. It's just that I'm a little bit older, so I
right.
I never liked that stuff that much. But so it's interesting because your influences are not typically what you would mention if you're a jazz guitar player. You would say like Wes Montgomery, Grant Green, Django
Hmm.
Reinhardt, or and then Miles Davis and blah blah. I know you like that stuff too, probably, but
Hmm.
you mentioned piano players and other things. So is that something you the case with you that you're not as influenced by guitar players, maybe, or
I say that, but I do have, coming back to something we said earlier, like embracing the guitar as like what it is, right? I have come to, I've always had guitar player influences somewhere, and many of those came from rock guitar. But in terms of jazz, and jazz across the eras, Nelson Veras was a huge influence for me.
Hmm.
Nelson, like I remember transcribing a lot of Nelson back when I was a Berklee student. Um, Nelson was one, Sylvan Luke was another.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, Sylvan was kind of the main inspiration behind me kind of switching to fingerstyle because
Yeah.
I saw him playing with his fingers. I was like, okay, well, it's not just a nylon thing. He does it on steel string as well,
Mm.
so why not? So those two for my swing feel, two guys, John Schofield for sure, but also Jesse Van Ruler. Jesse, I
Oh.
remember hearing Jesse Van Ruler and being blown away
Oh, yeah, yeah.
by, I mean, on all fronts, time, language, sound, and similarly, just plug straight into an amp and go for it. There's not a whole lot not a whole lot else in the good way.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are definitely also flamenco influences. Like I remember speaking with some people about Paco being an influence for me as a kid,
Hmm.
Paco de Lucia. Like that was just always present around the house.
Okay.
So I've always been in touch with the guitar as an instrument, but I might have got sidetracked a little bit. Like, oh, I want to sound like a piano player. I want to
Mm.
play these dense chords, but you know that eventually starts working its way back into your sound.
So you don't play with a pick at all now? Yeah, like your latest videos, it seems like you're not even using a pick anymore, or is that?
No, it's all fingers.
But you used
It's
to have like a hybrid technique, right?
Yeah, I
So
spent
you're like
maybe
Jeff Beck, you just stopped using a pick altogether.
yeah, I spent maybe what I started playing guitar when I was 12. So I spent like and I've been playing now without a pick for like 2 years. Almost somewhere around
Do
there.
you have a system for picking, or is it kind of organic, or?
So because you have a classical guitar background, you might be looking at my right hand and going, "What on earth is happening?"
Uh,
Because really there is no system. In a way, my hybrid picking kind of prepared me for it, but I
right.
had to teach myself how to use my index
Ah,
finger because my index finger had just kind of been dormant for 20 years.
hmm.
So I did,
That's very
uh,
backwards.
yeah, this developed just because, it kind of
Yeah.
developed somewhat from holding a pick. And these two were developed, even my pinky somewhat was developed for certain hybrid picking things.
Uh-huh.
But this was just totally non-existent. So I had to relearn like how to use it to get maybe more definition on the lower strings. And one thing I guess it's kind of a combination of classical technique because I do love some classical musicians and follow some classical guitar players these days, but it's kind of a hybrid of classical technique, electric bass, and
Hmm.
fingerstyle guitar and flamenco. Like all of those techniques are kind of coming together in this strange way of interpreting it, and it's also based on the instrument. Because one thing I realized very quickly was, oh, classical technique, unless you're Matteo Mancuso, um, classical technique is very difficult to apply to an electric instrument
Yeah.
because you have to worry about muting. And
Yeah.
slide technique also helped with developing my muting. So the core principle is essentially sometimes I'll usually lead with my ring finger, just kind of preserving that hand motion that's very natural. Thumb for the lower strings, unless I need extra definition, then I'll use the index finger. Beyond that, it's just whatever finger can kind of grab the note I need depending on the line. And I'm always thinking of the rhythmic propulsion of the idea. So, if I play something like there's not really a tech, even though it's mostly these two fingers, I'm not thinking of a system. I'm usually thinking of what do I need to get the idea out of the instrument.
Hmm. So you do play slide as well, which is very unusual in the jazz idiom.
Hmm.
But if you think about it, it's weird. Why? I can't think of any jazz guitar player that plays slide guitar.
There are two. that I can think of. One is David Tronzo, who teaches at Berklee.
Okay.
He'll play monk tunes and whatnot with slide. There's another guy kind of similar, Doug Womble, who I believe teaches at Juilliard, last I remember.
Oh.
But outside of that, I think it's a wonderfully expressive tool, is you can, for example, one of my favorite tunes, My Foolish Heart,
Mm.
or you can really bring that out for ballads. And
Ah.
it's even as a soloing tool, it requires you to slow down a lot. So in a way, for me, it was kind of, as someone who has put a lot of time into developing chops,
Mm.
for me it was a way of kind of focusing on other things and kind of
Right.
adding like extra dimension to my playing, because now it was more about, really focusing on how you deliver an idea.
Yeah. I'm always listen. Another thing that scares me up because I try to play that. Sometimes it just sounds like shit. I've done it in the studio a few times, but then you can do like 100 takes until you get it right. Like so, but yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a very closer to the voice, so I don't see why there aren't more. Maybe it doesn't fit the bebop idiom. Maybe that's why.
That it doesn't. I mean, if you're just, if I had to think of playing Donna Lee or
Yeah,
Anthropology or some bird head, like Yardbird Suite, or any like, imagine playing the Eternal Triangle with a slide
yeah.
that's not gonna that's not gonna work
No.
out too well.
So how come you ended up at Berkeley?
So for me, kind of, I think like most guitar players, especially who come from a rock background, Steve Vai and Dream Theater were kind of an influence for that decision. But in the grand scheme of things, living in Dubai, especially at Dubai in that time, it's changed a little bit since I was last there. Now there are some more musicians, but there wasn't really a community that could really push me to get better.
Mm,
So Berkeley was one of those, when I look back on it retrospectively, it was a great place for me to be at the time, because finally I was around people, like-minded people who were equally obsessed with music, who were equally crazy about music, who practiced crazy hours, and that was just inspiring for me to be around. And also being in a place where there were teachers who had, knowledge that wasn't easily accessible
mm.
back in that time, and that could really help push me forward. So that's really how I ended up there.
Did you know Tim Miller beforehand, or did you?
No, I had no idea.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until I got to Berkeley where one of my teachers in Dubai said, I think I'd already been at Berkeley a year, and one of my teachers in Dubai said, "Oh, you should go study with Tim Miller." And I looked him up and thought, "Oh my God, this sounds incredible." So Tim ended up being my teacher for pretty much the last half of my time at Berkeley.
Mm. So how much of an influence was he on your playing? Because he is claim to fame is all the like the 2-1-2 whatever, like organizing the scale or
Mm.
the fretboard patterns, what have you. Did that
Yeah.
influence you? I don't know how he teaches, but that's what I know him for. I mean, he's an unbelievable guitar player. He's one. He's. It's surprising too that I often mention his name to like musicians over here. They never heard of him,
Oh wow.
and then they check him out. It's like, but maybe it's because he's not in New York. I don't know. But he's
See, I think partially that there was a time where he lived in Paris for a year
really.
or so, I remember. And that's how, he found out about Nelson, and, subsequently, like how I eventually found out about Nelson, because
I'm
apparently
gonna
he
be embarrass myself. I don't know who you're talking about there, Nelson.
Veras.
I don't know who that is. Or maybe I do.
Nelson Veras, nylon string guitar player from Brazil, lives in Paris. Oh, phenomenal. You should go check him out.
Yeah,
He's
this sounds like
absolutely
something up my alley, but maybe I do know who that is. Okay,
yeah.
Nelson Vera. So yeah, I'll definitely check that out.
Yeah, I think you may have come across him at some point,
Probably.
but um mind-blowing musician, period. Um but with Tim I think was a really strong influence for me because he in a very kind way he pulled no punches. And
Mm.
I think that's especially something I needed. Like he would tell you, "Hey, your time needs work, but here's how we're going to do it." And he really encouraged me in that sense, getting tunes together as well. He kind of understood where I was coming from as someone who came from a rock background and was transitioning to jazz. So I think he was a good teacher for that. But the other thing I really admire most now looking back on my time studying with Tim was that he was always pushing me to figure out what I wanted to do. You know, I remember we actually started doing some of the 212 stuff, and I remember telling him I'd been working on it like pretty hard for a month. I said, Tim, I don't know what's going on. I've tried my hardest. This thing is just not sitting with my hands.
Right.
But for whatever reason, 313 sat very well with my
Oh,
fingers. And he's like, explore that more. He's like,
interesting.
and he was very quick to say, we all have different hands, and even though it's fundamentally the same structure for the most part,
Mm.
we have different hands. They respond differently. They move differently. We have different size fingers, whatever. So certain things are going to come more easily for you than for other people, and vice versa. Some things you might find very difficult.
So
And
what would it be if you don't mind showing like maybe a 313 you said the pattern could be what could it look like?
yeah. So here's the one I just played is like a very basic major pattern. So I've just got 1, 2, 3 on one string, one on the next string. So 1, 2, 3, 5, three on the next. So 7, 1, and 9. Three on the next. So that's just one note there. And then three on the top string, which for me felt a lot more pianistic in a
Mm.
way.
Yeah.
And another thing was Tim encouraged me to really explore like a lot of the dense harmony stuff, like all of these, like playing all of these big voicings, just because he saw I was able to do it. So he's like, really explore that path, and he was always very encouraging. Actually, my first album would not have happened if it weren't for Tim kind of pushing me off a cliff and saying, "You are going to release an album before you graduate."
Nice. So so how would you attack? You said exploring those harmonies. How would you organize everything? Would you go to a source of material, or would you sit down
So
and just structure everything, or how?
it's kind of for me, it's always been free exploration, although I have got things from either recordings or the odd book. So, for example, here's one voicing it's kind of ridiculous, but that I got out of Mick Goodrick's Almanac of Voice Leading.
Yeah,
It was it was from the second book where you'll start seeing chords that aren't really like a specific chord type, but
yeah.
just collections of intervals. But and then from there, I would just start tweaking things. So, for example, I swapped the top two voices, and that actually ended up as a part in one of my songs, "Traced in Sand." So then you find like little usable ideas. Beyond that, it would just be I'd find a voicing, figure out what it is. Like, let's say this one that we play a lot, then figure out, okay, I can use that on E flat. I can also use that on C minor.
Mm.
Can also use that maybe as like a G Aeolian sort of thing. Or F sus. I'd figure out different ways of
But
playing
would you
that.
write everything down somewhere, or would you? How would you like? Or,
I'm very terrible with this, and
mm,
it's only recently that maybe for some things I'd be writing things down, but I'd usually just memorize it. So
mm.
it would just be a lot of playing. Like maybe I'd play the standard like Solar, and then just start. And everywhere there is a minor seven chord, I would just shoehorn that voicing
Yeah.
in
So
there
apply it to a
until
tune. Yeah.
yeah, until it just becomes second nature.
Yeah. So that's how your lessons with Tim Miller was like. You played standards, or
Yeah, so initially because I was coming from like a rock fusion background,
oh,
it started as like just playing over chord progressions, but very quickly he kind of pushed me like, hey, if you want to get better, consider learning more tunes, like learning more music from
mm,
that perspective. So eventually we'd be tackling tunes like Solar, we'd be tackling classics, All the Things You Are,
yeah.
Have You Met Miss Jones. Sometimes I remember when I was first learning tunes and we were talking about how to learn tunes, he said, okay, your homework is Have You Met Miss Jones? Go learn it in 12 keys. And the first half hour when I came back next week was he was just calling out keys, and we would
Mm.
be playing the tune, not just playing the head, but improvising as well in whatever key he called the tune in.
Yeah, because it's funny because those players like Tim Miller, he's not known for playing jazz standards, but you can see him the videos with him and Mick Goodrick.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with I studied with Scott Henderson back in the day.
Mm.
He's not known for playing standards, and Alan Hines is another teacher that was there when I was at GIT. But all they did, they played standards. They know all the standards. They don't play like the old tunes, but certainly like Solar and stuff like that. That's what they do all day long. But people don't understand that uh, they can all do that. Maybe not.
Yeah, and
Because Tim Miller's
it's
music sometimes it's if you listen to some of Tim Miller's records, it doesn't sound like even like jazz, right? It's
mm-mm. It's kind of the extension of like it's from the Allen family
mm,
of stuff, if you would, or Allen inspired. But and Keith was also a huge inspiration for Tim. But
mm,
I do remember him saying, and I entirely agree with this, that this is the language. And
yeah.
if you're learning, if you're curious about jazz, it's not just playing a 2/5 line and then hoping for the best. It's understanding how to navigate that harmonic landscape.
Yeah, but it's
Because
also
that,
the rhythmic because I can when I hear you play
yes,
Solar, I can tell that you have jazz phrasing because a lot of more fusion oriented players when they try to play jazz, it sounds terrible even though they are fantastic. It's
right.
because they don't have the swing feel at
Yeah, and
all.
I had to work a lot on putting that together. And that was, checking out Jesse Van Ruler and Schofield
Yeah.
for me were huge influences for that. But also checking out, Elvin Jones, Bill Stewart, Jeff Tain Watts, Tony Williams, like really listening to the drummer and kind of honing
Mm.
in on, this is the time field to tap into.
Did you ever have a chance to study with Mick Goodrick? Was he still around there when you were there? Or?
He he was. I kind of regret not studying with him, but
Ah,
I knew for especially the player I was at the time, I just wasn't ready for a
yeah,
player like for a teacher like Mick, because Mick could be pretty brutal and cutting with some students,
yeah.
and I was a little deathly afraid of that. But in
And you
hindsight, I
were
wish
like
I
what, 19 or something when you started?
When I started at Berkeley, I was 17.
17. Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was very young. So when I got to studying with Tim Miller, I was probably 18.
Okay.
Like I was a kid. So I was deathly afraid. Like, bear in mind, kid with no expo doesn't come from jazz, like
Uh,
didn't grow up with the music, being, being with one of the greatest minds arguably to have explored the instrument. Like I
right.
was
I had the
definitely
exact same experience at GIT. I was 19, 18, I think,
mm,
and Jody Oreo was teaching there, and
same, yeah.
he was a super nice man, but he was very intimidating
Mm.
because he's such a monster. So I was scared. I was listening to him, but I was too afraid to play with him. I regret that because I should have, but
Yeah, I regret it as well. I should have, at least signed up for his lab and then maybe taken a lesson or two. But in a way, I kind of got a lot of mixed teachings uh, off the back end,
yeah.
partially through Tim, partially through other teachers like Daniele Camarda, who did study with Mick for a bit. So there was kind of
I don't
that
know who that is.
influence.
Say the name again.
Daniele Camarda, he was the bass player I mentioned that I
Oh,
worked with
okay.
in Dubai.
Okay.
Um, but also, just pouring through, eventually I did work through the almanacs on my own, and I still do to this
Even
day.
the third one?
The third one I haven't messed around with too
I have it.
much.
I have a PDF. I could never find a copy, like a physical copy of it, but
Yeah,
it
I
is
have the PDIF
it
somewhere.
is brutal.
It's, that's where I found like this voicing. I think that was from volume two, but I just, some days I'll just open up a book and go like, okay, like let's try my best to get through this. But it's a nice mental exercise.
Oh yeah, but it can be a little bit frustrating when it's too overwhelmingly difficult. I think. But um,
Yeah.
so what's the jazz scene in Colombia? You're in Colombia now, right? Like,
Yeah. It's a very small scene. It's small. I would say it's growing. Especially now, we've had a couple of new festivals that are starting to bring in some more international musicians. So it's definitely growing enough to warrant bringing certain musicians over. Like I think this year we have I think next month Pat Metheny's going to be here, Chris Potter's going to be here.
oh, nice.
So, it's growing, but definitely a very, very small scene, and not one that's very internationally recognized, even though there are some monster musicians living out here.
So so you teach at some at the college there, or
I used to. Nowadays, it's mostly private. I
okay,
just teach either through Zoom or just in person if someone uh, is passing through town or if a local student wants to take a lesson. But otherwise, everything is mostly through Zoom and international and just on my own.
okay. But there is a college pro.
So there are several, actually.
Okay,
So the one I was teaching at was Berkeley's Global Partner School,
interesting.
and I was from 2017 to 2019 when I was there for that a time, yeah, from 2017 to 2019. And then after the pandemic, I came back in like 2022 to teach for 1 year and then I left. But during 2017 to 2019, I was the guitar department chair there.
Okay,
So, I helped restructure the program. That was one program, but there are others. There are at least like the National University here has a program. Here, a university called La Javeriana has another that's kind of a more long running jazz program. El Bosque is another one. There are several universities, not just in Bogota, the capital, but around the country that have a jazz program of sorts.
mm. So it's funny because when we think about music from Latin America, it's like we talk about Afro-Cuban. It's like everything is focused on Cuba,
Yeah.
but there are all these other countries. I know
The,
if for classical guitar, there's certainly stuff from Colombia, but
yeah,
I can't think
and
of like,
Venezuela.
yeah. So, but how much does it matter that you're Colombian? Does that influence you? You said you were exploring some.
Yeah, I've always told people that I don't like to force things, and it's really by osmosis. So if I'm influenced by something and it starts coming out in my music, then it's because it wants to come out. The thing I hate the most is I'm going to take this style of music and I'm going to shoehorn it into jazz. And
Mhm.
for me, anytime somebody, in my mind at least, comes with the mindset of I'm going to create a fusion,
Mm.
like I'm going to will this into existence, it doesn't usually end up sounding so good.
Yeah.
So as a result, I've definitely been influenced by the music here, and part of it was a rhythmic endeavor too. So learning a lot more about different 6/8 feels or different 12/8 feels,
Mm.
you know, because especially in the Western world, I grew up in a British school, so we're taught like 6/8 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3. It's kind of that lilting 6/8 feel. But in Latin America, in Africa, North Africa, the Middle East, that's another 6/8 feel.
Mm.
And there are different variances of that 6/8 feel. Or especially like the 3 feel from like uh, like that comes from joropo, which is from like Los Llanos, and
Yeah.
Los Llanos is like a border style between Colombia and Venezuela.
Right.
Similarly, chacarera, which comes from Argentina. So as a result of just living here on and off, uh, you know, some of it has worked its way into my music just by osmosis, which I'm really grateful for.
Right. Yeah. I also before we call it a day, you have made like etudes and stuff, and you have a website where we can find your etudes.
Hmm.
Are those for six string guitar or for seven?
Yes, those are all for six.
Yeah.
The first Etudes book was written with a six, and for Etudes Volume 2, I'm guessing like some people see me play a seven and they see that and they think, oh, like maybe it's for seven string. I might not be able. They're entirely six string. You can actually see in the videos I don't even touch the low B.
So
So
how do you or so I said an etude is supposed to be an exercise, I guess that is also something you could perform and enjoy.
yes,
How do you is it like you're exploring a certain concept, or how do you go about creating those etudes?
yeah. So for me, I was really inspired by Chopin because some of Chopin's etudes, like the Revolutionary Etude or the Ocean Etude or the Black Keys Etude, they're considered part of classical repertoire. You don't just. Oh, I think you. Oh yeah, we're good. You just froze for a little bit there,
Oh, okay.
but that's part of classical repertoire, right?
Mm.
But yeah, that's part of classical repertoire. So I felt, why not write some etudes that you could actually perform and they sound like a piece of music, as opposed to just here is an exercise for spread triads and call it a day. So I really, with Etudes 1 and Etudes 2, especially Etudes 2, my primary goal and intent was I want to make something that is musically interesting and listenable.
Yeah,
And
I love that. And could you just maybe you can't play them off the top of your head, but could you give us a just a taste of what?
I
Like,
can't like
you're like Ben Monder. You can't play anything like that
that
you've
I've
written.
written. If I remember, uh, Yeah, I can't remember it, but that's would be like an opening example of
So
it.
that would be like spread triads or something.
Exactly. So that would be like spread triads, and I would group things together. So that one, the videos, by the way, I've put up for free if anyone wants to check them out before buying the book.
So
But
those
it
are
would be,
PDF books, right? You don't have any
yes,
physical copies.
it's a PDF. Etudes 2 in particular is like a 60-page
Oh,
PDF. Like I've really just put as much information as I can in there. It also comes with like 90 minutes of video. So both the videos performing, so you can slow them down, speed them up as much as you, or, play along with them, or the breakdown videos where I, take you through a couple of things that maybe I wasn't able to get into when going through the written summaries. Um, but the the idea, for instance, with this one was spread triads, but it was also playing in five. And if I were to improvise something, it would be like maintaining a melody, maintaining a melody with an accompanying voice. So
nice.
I'll group concepts into an etude so
That
that
that kind of came to what comes to mind is Brad Meldow there. What you just did there. I don't know.
right, and that was a huge inspiration for me. Brad Meldow, Keith Jarrett, like being able to move and we like just go through harmony, but still give you like a melody somewhere.
Yeah.
And so, in a way, what was it? I can't play it, but there was a ah classical repertoire, Laudo, Antonio Laudo,
Yeah.
um, one of the valses, I think.
Yeah.
Same sort of.
Yeah. Yeah. The Venezuelan waltzes here.
Yeah, same concept. But the idea it'd be like I'd take an idea, or I think another one that I remember off the top of my head started like it would be voice leading with close voice triads,
Hmm.
or there would be a counterpoint etude where it's just more about, again, this one isn't from the etude book, but it's just the inspiration for the concept, like having moving voices in your
Yeah.
harmony. So uh also in etude 2 there's some rhythmic stuff that I wanted to throw in. So like uh but yeah, keeping like something along those lines. I
Hmm.
can't remember it exactly. Yeah, I
Re-
guess I'm like Ben Monder. I can't play anything I write.
Yeah. That reminded me of Lionel. I was saying Lionel Louiki. Lionel Louiki.
Yeah, Lionel. Again, another massive inspiration, but keeping that rhythmic layer going
But was he
while
there at Berkeley when you're I guess you're younger than him, but was he there at the same time? No.
no, Lionel I think graduated Berkeley I think a good 10 years before I got
Oh,
there.
okay. Yeah, you.
Yeah, I'm much younger.
Yeah.
But Lionel was a huge influence while I was there. So especially maintaining like a uh, like Lionel, Wayne Krantz,
Mm,
Charlie Hunter,
right.
those were all massive influence for like that strong rhythmic thing.
Yeah, that's I mean, I could go on and ask you about a million things, especially the counterpoint thing. That's to me is like a such a huge topic, and
Mm.
but yeah, we should probably call it a day because I don't want to take up all your time. Plus, I don't want to kill
Hey,
my hard drive. So yeah, so where can people find your stuff? Your website is where they is the best place to find your.
yes. So if you want to schedule a lesson, or if you just want to check out, some of the books that I have, Etudes, I do have a composition book as well for
Hmm.
if people want to check out. And I've got some backing track packages and things like that. Or even the sheet music from the album. That's all on my website, juandhas.com, Juandhas. If you want to keep up to date with what I'm doing guitar wise or with music and recording and the occasional lessons here and there, my YouTube channel is also a great place to stop by, and I'm also on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah, cool. I'll put links to that stuff. So yeah, this was great. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.